Hi, this is Linda Remmers from HoopSisters, and today we're going to show you the attic window block. Here behind me on the wall is the 8-inch attic window block, and I have in my hand the 5-inch attic window block. So let's get started. The supplies we need for our attic window block would be the battleizer, large enough to fit in your hoop. You need your fabric 1, in my case it's white. Your fabric 2, I'm going to use green. Fabric 3 for me will be purple. This is my backing fabric, a nice pretty print. You will need thread B, I'm going to use green plus a bobbin. Thread C, I'm going to use purple plus a bobbin. You will also need your washaway thread. So as you can see, I've hooped my battleizer. I've stitched step 1 on top of the battleizer with a thread so you could see it. So it gave me my outline. The next step for step 2 is to put washaway thread in your needle only. And I'm going to take fabric 1 and I'm going to place it right side up over this small square in the corner here. I'm going to make sure I have approximately 1/2 inch on outside edges. I'll place it there, and then I'll use my water soluble thread to tack this down. So this is step 2 already stitched with the washaway thread. As you can see, I use my hoop scissors to trim anything that's on the inside of the block a scant 1/4 inch, on the outside 1/2 inch. Then I'm going to take fabric 2, which is my green. I'm going to place it right side to fabric 1. It's going to sew this seam here. Don't forget to change to a neutral color thread for your seam, and we'll go ahead and stitch step 3 right now. So step 3 is finished. I stitched my seam. I'm going to flip it over and finger press my seam. I'm going to place my washaway thread in the needle, and it's going to tack this area down right here. Just finished stitching step 4 with the washaway thread, so now I'm going to trim. This is the inside of the block, so I'm going to do like a scant 1/4 inch with my hoop scissors. And then I'm going to take fabric 3, this will be step 5, and I'm going to place it right side to this seam right here. So I'll put it just like this. Don't forget to change to your neutral thread, and you're going to stitch the seam. Here's our seam from step 5. So then we take our fabric, we flip it right side up, finger press it. We're going to change back again to our washaway thread, and it's going to sew the tack down stitch. So I just completed sewing step 6 with my washaway thread. It's time to trim this area here. This is going to be a raw edge applique that'll be stitched later. So this we need to trim really close, nice and tight. And then it's time for step 7 to put my thread B in the needle only. So in my case it'll be green, and it'll do some decorative stitching. Here's my completed step 7 with my thread B. Now for step 8, we're going to put thread C in the needle only, and it'll do some decorative stitching on this fabric. For step 9, we're going to be doing the stem stitch. It's going to cover this raw edge. I've happened to choose my green thread to do that, so I'm going to put that in my needle only, and it'll do the stem stitch right there. We're ready to do step 10. Step 10 is putting the back on. So we're going to switch again to our water soluble thread. I'm going to take my backing fabric and I'm going to spray it with a little temporary spray adhesive, and I will, on the back side of my hoop, take my backing fabric, center it over my stitching, make sure it's stuck down, and then we will go ahead and baste this on. I've just completed stitching the back on, so now we're going to move on to step 11. You can go ahead and turn the thread cutter off of your machine at this point, because it's time to put in your stem stitch thread in the needle and the bobbin. So let's go ahead and stitch more stem stitching on our quilt block. We're on our final step for our attic window block, and that is to place the quilting thread in the needle and the bobbin, and it's going to do some quilting stitches on our block. Here we have our completed block. Now I'm going to show you how to trim the block. If this block were going to be an outside edge where we would be applying binding, we would trim 1/4 inch from the basting line through all layers. So I will do that first because I'm going to put binding on this corner. On the other two edges, we're going to stitch the blocks together. So I'm going to use our trimmer by George to trim these edges. So the way to do that is to pull back the top layer of the block, take your trimmer edge, which has that small crimped edge, and put it up to the fabric, lay it down flat, give it a little tug, and I always check underneath to be sure I've got everything I want to be trimmed under there. Run your rotary blade right next to it. It removes the battleizer and the backing. I'll do the same thing on this side. Take a little check, trim it, and now I have to cut the top layer 1/4 inch from the basting line. And there we have our completed block. On the back side, you'll see I've gone through all three layers on the outside edge for the binding, and on the inside edge I've trimmed off my backing and my battleizer. So there's your attic window block. So I've laid out 4 completed blocks. This is how my quilt, my original quilt, was laid out for the attic window. You can have a lot of fun with this block. I'm going to turn all the corners, the white corners, into the center, and we get this. So play around with your blocks and maybe you'll come up with an even prettier arrangement.